This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Fun time to be a Browns fan, right? And no funner time to be locked in to the building. So to get an inside scoop of what's going on in Berea and how the Browns are doing, and bring in somebody who's there at practice every day. Cam, how are things?
They're less fun than they used to be. I'll tell you that.
The vibes are different from last year at this point.
Different. Yeah, but I will say, like, it's not completely derailed. It's not like mutiny in the locker room as of Wednesday, when everything also could spiral as the week goes on and as the season goes on. But right now, I think that it could be worse. Sitting 1-4, you could expect them to, just be totally out. But I've seen worse. I've felt worse. I've seen better. I've felt better. And so not the most fun, but here we are.
I have not witnessed a quarterback play a game so bad on film that it goes viral, not just amongst like the general NFL fan community, but the like advanced analytics crowd. This game went viral with, despite it being a 1:00 Sunday game, and this went viral with the film breakdown community. Like, this game was so bad, it was actually a crossover hit. And it's shocking how bad this game is. I'm wondering, though, to us, how he's played the first 5 games is a bit of a shock, right? Because he was not this bad in 2023, right? He wasn't this bad. He was workable. Like, he wasn't what you were promised, but he was workable. He was average to above average. This is not even close to average at this point. Like, I think in order for him to have an average QBR, he would have to have one of the biggest turnarounds that has ever seen within a single season. I'm wondering, Cam, how long has it looked like this with Watson? Like, has this just been what it's looked like for him since he's come back from the injury? And if that's the case, what kind of toll do you think that could take on the offense? Because, like, we're 5 weeks into this and we're like, oh my God, I can't imagine waiting until the bye week to do something. I couldn't imagine if I was aware of this in like March, where my mind would be at.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, truthfully, like, let's be super honest, right? We have seen glimmers of the old Deshaun Watson in moments over the past 3 years. We have not once seen consistency. He's never put 2 games back to back together. And yes, obviously suspension. And then we said rust, and we said, it was just because he didn't play in almost 2 years and he just needed to get back into it. And then last year was the injury and it was a little messy there. But at the end of the day, the consistency hasn't existed. We've seen glimmers, but when you have a sample size that is now, it's over a season. We're over a season into this overall, collectively. And all you have are the Titans game, a half of a Ravens game, a couple throws here and there, and that's what you have. I think you have to start to look at the sample size and think, okay, maybe this is the reality. And the glimmers are flashes in the pan. And I hate to say that, but I mean, you have to go based on what you're seeing and what has been given. And so 5 games into this season, and the best you have is, well, he wasn't the biggest problem against the Raiders. That's the best you have. He wasn't the problem. It was drops. It was this, it was that. He played fine. He didn't play great. He just played fine. He didn't turn the ball over an absurd amount of times. He didn't make huge mistakes, and he had a couple nice balls, but like, that was it. And so for me, I think that, like, yes, we've seen this, but we have seen it past this season. This was the biggest question. The biggest question mark about Deshaun Watson was, would he be able to put those glimmers and those moments that he was looking like the quarterback that can impress in the NFL if he could put them together into a game, into multiple games, and into most of a season.
Mm.
And you haven't had it one time this season. You've had moments where he is a quarterback who can play for your team, but he's 5 games deep, hasn't given you quite literally anything to be proud of, to say that's our quarterback. And so I think it stems from way beyond just this. And the injury is an excuse. The rust is an excuse, and they are all viable reasons why things were not great. But when they start to pile up and you're not getting great, it becomes a problem and it becomes something that you cannot ignore anymore. And it's maybe he comes out against the Eagles and it's lights out, fireworks, the explosive offense that everybody wants for the rest of the season. But if we're being realistic, what makes you feel like that will be the case? What has happened in 3 years that makes you think that can be the case? And this is where you start to get into some issues. And I think in the offense, right, they're watching this. And I think there's that locker room is so supportive. And you've got to appreciate that because you don't want it to spiral. You don't want them to fall apart and turn on each other. And so the fact that they're supporting Deshaun Watson and saying like he's our guy, it's a team problem, it's our offense as a whole. We gotta protect him better. We've got to catch the passes. That's big. You want that. You don't want your locker room to fall apart. But what I want to see more of, and it's easy to say from an outsider, it's harder to do as the person. Deshaun Watson needs to take accountability and own that he is not playing well enough, and not just the PR
Mm-hmm.
answer, the coach's answer of I got to play better, I'll play better. Own it. You're a captain on this team, you are a leader of the offense, and you are a guy that this team has put a lot into, put almost everything into. And so when you're not playing your best, you don't need to self-deprecate. You don't have to be that far into it, but you need to have accountability and you need to know, you need to make people aware that you are aware that you're not playing your best. Don't gaslight people into seeing like thinking that they are not seeing what they're seeing. They don't need to be in the film room. Fans don't need to be in the film room with you to know that things are not going well. They just don't. And I think that is a
Yeah.
really big thing that would go a long way if there was a little bit more openness to we are not playing well and here's what we can do better. I missed this read. I didn't see this. I made the wrong call on this. Like that's on me, own it. Quarterbacks around the league do that. It doesn't have to be self-deprecating. It can just be an honest self-evaluation. And that to me
Mm-hmm.
is the biggest problem is that not only are you getting poor play and okay play at best, you are not getting any semblance of a vocal leader. And that is the most important thing for a quarterback. You can be a quiet leader. Amari Cooper is a guy that they like say, he's a quiet leader, doesn't talk. Nick Chubb is a quiet guy that doesn't talk. But even Myles Garrett, right? Like he's a little bit more reserved. These are guys in the locker room that lead by example. They're on the reserve side. That, unfortunately, is not the life of a quarterback, especially when you are the captain and there are people counting on you to rally this thing around at 1-4. So my issues there, I think that is how an offense might react to it, right? Like they're going to support him, and you want that. But at the end of the day, they need him to take charge. They need him to be a leader, and that's not happening. And he's not playing well on top of it. And it's a recipe for disaster. It cannot continue this way. Something has to change. Something has to change because this is the recipe of spiraling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a credit to the 53 in there, right? I do want to give them some credit, at least 52 of them, that this hasn't turned into a absolute cluster, right? Like a situation like this has the like they had to do it in what Carolina where they had to bench Bryce Young after 2 weeks because they saw this coming. Like, but I don't want the Browns to fall into this trap of because their locker room is mature about this that they're going to drag this thing on longer and longer because it's one thing for them to be mature about this right now because they're kind of in a bubble, right? They're playing road games. They're not seeing the fans. Like they're away from all of the vitriol that this team is accumulating over this stretch of games. And the one thing I worry about is like, okay, once the fans at home have the reaction that I think they're going to have and like you can't stop. I know people are like, we got to be better than this and root them on and cheer them. Like, people are going to react to the football team the way that they see it. The record is bad. The tape is bad. You're not gonna get a bunch of people in there. Like I've seen some of the most optimistic people. Now, shout out to Nick Carnes, right? He's probably one of the most optimistic, positive folks you'll ever see. I get the feeling that he would even boo this team. Like it is what it is. Like you can't police that. Like that's how the people feel, right? And right now you can kind of get away with it because your locker room is mature enough to understand what the situation is. They have not been forced to be exposed to the feelings of those who do not care why you're in this situation, right? They just care that it's happening and it's not stopping. And look, getting booed at home, worst feeling in sports. Getting booed the way they're going to get booed at home.
Oh, that's going to sting.
It's going to be like when he came back against Houston. Like, and I really don't want this situation to happen. Like, I hope they do something before we get there because, like, it's not that it's going to hurt Deshaun Watson's feelings about the Browns and Browns fans. We know that this is on its way out, whether they accept it right now or not. This has limited days left that you're going to be able to do this. It's just not feasible. It's going to end up being not a financially viable decision. Like we talked about, you're going to get fan apathy if you try to make them sit through this. You know, so that's not really an option there economically or emotionally for this fan base. They're not going to come back and keep watching these games. I think they've showed that they're just going to, they'll leave. They left in the last home game. They emptied out of there so quickly, right? Like we're done. They're done. They decided then they're done. And in the halftime of this game, it's over. Like it's done. So what I don't want to happen is that to affect the relationship that Myles Garrett has with this fan base, right? Mm-hmm. That Grant Delpit and JOK has with this, like guys who are young, signed under contract. David Njoku has with this team, right? Maybe DeJuan Jones, like all these other guys who are going to catch strays from how they feel right now about the quarterback. And it's just so avoidable. Like all of this is so avoidable. All it takes is to swallow some pride, right? And that can be a tough thing, but like I really hope they get to that point. But kind of back to our conversation about mini camps, OTAs, and how long it's looked that way. Does it make some things make sense in retrospect now that you watch it? Where like the Amari Cooper story, like I'm like, oh, that makes a little bit more sense what we saw on Instagram because maybe the context we were thinking about him talking about that in had nothing to do with the city, right? Like it had something to do with a different situation that he had to deal with in the city. When you look back at some of these things that have happened over the course of the last, like since he's started throwing again, right? What starts to make more sense to you that you could put together?
I think it probably would be the health, like the health angle, right? Of the ramp up and what we didn't see a lot of and really any at all. I say a lot. I mean, I think I saw 3, 4. It wasn't happening a lot, even when the full practices were open. Deep shots down the field. They just weren't happening. They weren't rolling any of that out. And at the time it was like, okay, well, he's going through the shoulder rehab, he's not ready yet, but then he's cleared for contact in the preseason and then he doesn't play in the preseason, but he's healthy. And then you're hearing that he's healthy, not just from the team, not just from him, but from his people, like everybody around him is like, the shoulder's not a problem. That's been the case. Like there was no semblance of the shoulder being, a hindrance or something that was going to be an asterisk when he started this 2024 season. That was not a thing. And so I thought, okay, maybe they're playing it safe with not doing too much and like exerting that out there. But now I don't know. Now I'm thinking, like what we haven't seen any explosive plays because everything's a check down. And when it is deep, it's overthrown and it's off.
And that's interesting, right? It's overthrown now. That's not how he used to miss guys. right? Like he used to underthrow guys a lot, right? Because he likes to put the arc on the ball, but now he's
Mhm.
overthrowing almost everything he tries to push downfield. And the ball goes far, but it doesn't go fast anymore.
No, it's like a duck.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know. To me, it's like again, there has been no the shoulder is off the table. Like you can't come to me later and be like this, oh, this was maybe it wasn't all the way there. Like it wasn't you can't do that because like from day one, before he even played a snap, before week one happened, it was perfectly fine. So that's off the table now. And so you
Mm-hmm.
think like, okay, why is this not happening? And I don't know. I truly, Quincy, I wish I knew. I wish I understood more why this took such a shift because even last year, and after a season of that rusty Deshaun and they're trying to get rid of that and get him back up to speed, you still saw some of that. And it's
Mm.
just I don't I don't know. And I don't know. I wish that I did. It's like something has just totally shifted in him and the way that he's being utilized. And again, we can talk about all day the things that are impacting his play, right? We can talk about the pass protection and the offensive line and the injuries that have riddled that. We can talk about that all day. And yes, he has been under pressure. And absolutely, he has taken hit after hit and he has been sacked more than he should. And probably more than he would if this line was healthy and
Mm-hmm.
playing at its fullest potential. But at the same time, Deshaun Watson has made himself known for one thing, and it's holding on to the ball longer than most quarterbacks and extending plays in ways that other quarterbacks don't. That's his bread and butter. That's what he prides himself on as being different from the rest. The problem is that before, when he would extend a play and he would put himself into that, he would do what we saw against Washington and Jaden Daniels under pressure. Jaden Daniels under pressure sails a 66-yard bomb, perfectly placed. Under pressure and into duress. I mean, it's just that is what we saw from Jaden Daniels was Deshaun Watson. Like
That's a
that was what
superstar quarterback throw, right?
exactly. And there has been none of those. You have some where he's placing it in these crazy windows, and you're like, that's a good ball. But he's in the NFL. Like, I mean, truly, he is in the NFL. Whether he's playing well or not, he is in the NFL. Look across the NFL. These guys are making great plays. They are capable of making great plays. All
What
of
can
them. NFL quarterback.
Yeah, what concerns me is that it's one thing if you're like he's getting close to 30, you expect some kind of physical degradation at that point in an athlete's career. But the whole point of getting Deshaun, right, was that he'd be able to age well, that he wasn't just his athletic ability, that he would be able to process and make up for it. That was the big thing I had with Baker Mayfield, and then people, I didn't give him slack for it then. And like, it's amazing how I become a Baker stan to some people and a Baker hater or a Deshaun stan or a Deshaun hater. Well, I've been pretty consistent about this. Like, you go out there, I'm going to hold you to a certain bar and make sure that you play to that. And with Baker, I'm like, hey, if he wants to be a franchise quarterback, he has to be able to lean on his processing to get over some of his physical ailments to play the quarterback position. Same thing with Deshaun, right? Like, even if his shoulder is hurt, like, okay, you still got to process. Like, some of this stuff isn't even like your ability to throw the ball far. It's just like you just make a decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the most telling is how he's responding to it now. Deshaun back in the day, his first year in Cleveland, before all of this started, and back in Houston, if he made a mistake, he would tell you exactly what happened in that play from detail, from memory, right? Like this was a big thing he used to always go viral for.
Mm-hmm.
He'd be like, oh yeah, they were in palms. This guy came and he did that. The safety buzz, he wasn't supposed to do that, so I knew I could rip it deep there. Like he used to be able to do that, right? That's something that he could do. Now it's y'all don't know film. Y'all don't know what y'all talk. It's a decoy, right? Like, and it's like, yeah, bro, that don't pass the smell test because we know how you usually talk about football when you're confident about what you're supposed to do. And it just rings to me as a player who does not have confidence in himself to perform anymore. And at times, I think he makes that everybody else's problem. And look, this team is mature and patient because a lot of these dudes are 27, 28 years old. But you know what's the other part of that? Amari Cooper's on a contract year. and he's being judged because of your mistakes right now. You're costing him money. He might be able to like, hey man, we could just have a strong second half of the season. But once it becomes evident that he's not going to have the season he wants in a contract year because of you, it's not going to be fun. Jed Wills, he's getting blamed for a lot because Deshaun's like evading these pockets early. He's rolling out. It's making Jed look bad. Like if you're in a contract year and you're in this offense, it's to the point to where this dude is costing you money, right? I think it makes sense to me, and maybe this is me putting my tinfoil hat on, that Jerry Jeudy's the one dude who's like, I'll figure it out, because one, he's played with cooked quarterbacks before, like Russell Wilson, and two, he's like, yeah, I've already got paid. Like, I'll wait this one out. I'm gonna be here for the next one. Right, like, but Amari Cooper's like, yo, I gotta get paid, and you're not hitting basic stuff, and you know how it is when you need your money. That mistake, if you waiting on somebody to get you to a location because News 5 needs you there, and that person is late, and you being evaluated, hey, no, can't happen. You need to get there on time, right? There's a sense of urgency there, and what this is telling me, back to my main point, I know I took the long route here. But what this is telling me, the fact that he's not giving us detailed answers anymore, he can't even explain it. Because if this were explainable, he has the vocabulary to be able to explain it. He's done this before. So what I think is that this is not explainable. He can't explain it. He's mystified when he gets the iPad and it's seeing ghost. It's rookie quarterback bad. How do you think the other quarterbacks in there are handling? I know Jameis is a pro. He's been through stuff like this. But for a young guy like DTR, how do you think, like, when he sees this and, like, I have no idea how Ken Dorsey and Kevin Stefanski handle that in that quarterback room? Because you can't be sending a message that this is okay, right?
No, I know. And I will say this about Dorian is, like, he's young, but he is very mature young. Like, he, I think, has a really good head about him where I think he knows the reality of situations, and this doesn't skew him one way or another in his development or where he's at. I think he's very hyper focused on what he needs to do and the steps that they have on him. So I truly am not concerned about, how this impacts Dorian. I think in a different scenario with a different young quarterback that's a developmental guy that they're working on building towards having that potential to, get in there and get into games and help a team. I think that another younger guy,
a more
without
impressionable
the disposition, if he was more impressionable, I think it would be a problem. But I don't think the Browns have lucked out in the regards of they've got a good one in Dorian, and I don't think that it changes his trajectory. And it does also help, as you mentioned, Jameis Winston is a guy that, if anything was going to be bad, at least you have a guy in here that is very well seasoned in this regard of knowing some dysfunction in an offense and working through it. And he's a guy that can find maybe some humor and some positivity and bring a little bit of light to a situation. Now, that doesn't always work. Sometimes things get too messy, and I'm hoping the Browns don't go that far, because then even, a Jameis Winston eating a dub is not going to save you there. Like the chemistry will fall apart. But right now, I think, and Deshaun should thank them with like a steak dinner for being guys, like glue guys that can really hold their own through some mess while Deshaun figures out whatever he needs to figure out, and while the Browns figure out whatever they need to figure out about Deshaun. I think having a guy like Dorian, they're lucky that it's him, and they're lucky they have a guy like Jameis that brings a different energy, because otherwise that room would probably not be great. It would probably be pretty gross.
When I look at the defense, that's the one where I'm like, I don't know how much patience they're gonna have for this. Because like we can talk about like how their money is affected on offense, and like that's true, but this defense, like I think in my mind, and this is my opinion, so I don't want to say that this is what I think happened, but I watched that Commanders game and I saw a defense realize that nobody was coming. Right? Like it just looked like, because the way that they came out, the way that they played at the beginning of the game, I'm like, okay, they're doing a lot. Like they had a good hold. I mean, they held up well in the red zone at the beginning of that game. And then I believe it were like 3 straight possessions where the Browns get absolutely nothing on offense. And it's like with like 5 minutes left in the second half, in the first half. and then like they get to double dip on touchdowns, the Commanders do, because like of a bad field position I think they got from the offense, and then the offense gets a fumble to start the drive, to start the half out, and they do nothing with it. And I was like, yeah, it's gonna be hard to be like play really like they're gonna go out there and be professionals. I don't want to say that they were not trying, but there is an effort you give when you legitimately think you have a chance to win, and I think that's just natural, right? Like there's how you play when you feel like you're outmatched. We see this all the time in like college football. What the saying is, when you play, like when Ohio State plays Akron, it's like you can't let them believe they can win, right? Like, or when they play Youngstown State, like you can't let them think they could win, because all of a sudden, then they're gonna go from like, okay, we know what it is. It's the first half. That's Marv. Like it's gonna be what it is. To hold on, we might be able to shock the world, right? And I think you saw it because Akron kept that game kind of close for a little bit,
They
right?
did. They held them to 17 and a half and they put up 6 and it was nice. And I wish you would have gone like, oh, when Kent State played Tennessee and it was you didn't have to hurt me.
See,
You
that's how
didn't have
Kent State. The
to.
Kent State does it right. They go out there, they play them SEC schools for money. So don't nobody see that. Y'all be playing the schools that everybody see. Like, oh yeah, we gonna play Michigan State. Like we gonna watch that. Like,
So
but
sad.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, when you think you have a chance to win, it's not professionalism. Like you can't manufacture that. Like it has to exist. And we saw this in micro doses last year in 2023, where yeah, the first 3 games, I think that everybody felt like they had a chance to win. Deshaun was playing at an average enough level to where you didn't feel like he was hindering your ability to win at the very least. And then DTR came in, and they kind of realized that the situation was kind of cooked at quarterback for that week, right? Because it was just a weird spot for the team to be in. It became obvious in that Baltimore game that DTR just was not going to be able to move the ball, and the defensive effort went to where it goes. And then Deshaun comes back versus, what was it, Arizona. I know he came back a little bit against Indy, but
Yeah.
he comes back full time against Arizona. You get the effort you need. Same thing happens in Baltimore. You get the effort you need. But then DTR comes back out there. They win the game against Pittsburgh, but then he gets out. You get back to PJ Walker, and the effort goes wherever the effort goes. And it wasn't until, because people forget this, that first game with Joe Flacco wasn't even close, right, against the Rams. It wasn't until that second game, I believe, against the Jaguars, that they won, that everything started to change, right? You started to get better efforts out of everybody. It's because they believe they could win. They don't go out there with the belief that they have enough on the other side of the ball to win, and you can't fake it. Like the offense knows it when they watch the defense. They don't think we can win. Like you can't fake it. And then the offense, sometimes it feels like they know they don't think they can win. And that has to center around somebody. Like when that's a situation, the whole thing, it can't stay the same. Kevin Stefanski's a 2-time coach of the year. He's had good offenses with other quarterbacks. I don't think he's the first guy who should fall here. Ken Dorsey would be an absolute scapegoat at this point, because we haven't even got to see if the offense is really
Any of the
his
things that he
fault.
wanted to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you look at this logically, like, yeah, it's probably going to be Ken Dorsey that has to take the fall here, if we're just looking at the money of it. But we know who should take the fall here, right? Like we know who should like understand where it's at and where the play is, and it's just a miserable place to be in. So how do you feel like this locker room will be able to handle that long term? Where, like, do you think, how many weeks do you give it before that thing breaks?
That's a loaded question. I think I'm not going to sit here and pretend that like there are not guys that are frustrated. There absolutely are guys that are frustrated because they're losing. They're not just losing. Like let's take a step back and realize who they're losing to. They're losing to the Giants. They're losing to the Raiders. They're losing to the Commanders. This was the easy part of the schedule. This was the part of the schedule where you're like, okay, the Browns just need to get off to a hot start and then they're going to be good. They're in really good shape. Playoffs right there. You have gone through the easy on paper. Every NFL team, and they'll say it all day long, any NFL team has a chance to win on any given Sunday. There's a reason they're in this league. You can't count out anybody. But on paper, This was the part of the schedule that should have been a breeze. This is the part that you can really experiment with the offense. You can start to open things up. Maybe it was supposed to be a slow game, and they've said it. They said it going into this. You're not going to see everything right away. It's going to take a little bit of time to get things going because you don't want to show too much too early because they felt as though these were games that were achievable for them to win. These were games that they were supposed to win. And when you don't, and you don't again, and then you don't again, and it looks like this, it is so easy to be frustrated, and you should be frustrated. You should not be
Mm-hmm.
happy with this. You should not be complacent. But I think that frustration leads to cracks. Cracks lead to breaks. And so right now it's frustration. And I don't, it's not broken, but I don't think it takes a very long time when you start to lose divisional games and you see your season truly slip away because right now, I mean, it feels bleak. One and
One
four,
in five is just
1-5
undoable.
is bad. I
Yeah.
mean, this is all bad.
You
I mean,
went
that's like,
11-6 last year.
yes.
Like
So to have
what
to win every
one
single,
in five, and then you're playing the Bengals, and it's like if you don't beat that Bengals team that week, dog, I don't know what to tell you.
and it changes that changes everything. So right now I can see why it's not broken because you're 1-4 and that's not where you want to be. But again, anything can happen in a season. And like obviously the Steelers have a better record. The Ravens are the stronger team right now, how they're playing for sure, and they've got the better record, but the Bengals are sitting there at the bottom with you. I mean, they're not playing well. And so you can see realistic ways of like how it doesn't start off well, but you can bounce back and recover. When you start to get too far deep into this, that goes away. And then when you start to get into division games and your season is truly over and you still have to go out there and play, that's when things start to break because now your frustration is just like, well, why am I even here? And
Oh,
so
and them
it's
dudes know
close.
you, right? That's the underrated element of this. Them dudes you playing against know you. They've been in this division for like 4 years too. They've seen, so they also are gonna know you well enough to push the buttons, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
they might not want to push the buttons because they don't. They might think that the Browns are a better team if they bench their quarterback. So like they might not want to accidentally start the coup. Like,
Start the coup was
yeah,
crazy.
because like let these dudes feel like they getting embarrassed out there by their
That's
peers,
where it starts.
right?
That's where it
That's
starts.
like, and I'm telling the Browns this right now. You want to make this decision before you gotta make the decision, right?
Mhm.
Like you want to make this decision when you still have options on the table. You do not want your back against the wall. Don't sit here and wait for the NFL to save you with a suspension. Like you got to make this decision while it's still a choice. Because if he goes out there and throws 4 interceptions, that's the only thing he's got on him, right? I ain't throwing a lot of interceptions. It's the one thing that Deshaun Watson has. If he goes out there and he starts like blindly throwing it because he's not seeing anything. So if he just starts trying to throw the ball deep blind, he's going to throw like 4 or 5 interceptions.
And
And
that's
at
the end.
that point, that's it. You better take him out in the middle of that game. Like, because if you try to trot him out as the starter against a divisional opponent, you, by the way, have an amazing record against at home in this era of the Browns, right? The Stefanski
Mhm.
era. I don't think you've ever lost to them at home under Kevin Stefanski. If you risk losing that game at home and like pretty much your chances of being any kind of respectable team throughout this season, I mean, yeah, you could get outright anger, but worse, you could get apathy.
That's the
Like,
worst.
and
And they don't want to experience that.
you just can't let it get to that point. You really can't. And that's going to be on Kevin and everybody else to make sure, like, at some point, somebody's got to decide to do something.